Breaking a long-standing taboo, Japan is now allowed to sell weapons to Europe.
Japan does have a long-standing security cooperative relationship with all these different countries that are really facing pressure from Russia.
I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. We'll take you to Beirut's waterfront, where thousands who have fled fighting in southern Lebanon are stuck camping out.
They're not feeling secure at all, especially with today you have the drone that's literally, I can feel it in the middle of my living room here.
And investors are betting big on Venezuela.
Things are moving at light speed for foreign investors. The government is pushing through significant reforms.
And do you or don't you rescue Timmy the whale? Hear arguments on both sides.
All that and the latest news headlines today here on The World. This is The World. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Great to have you with us. It is day 5 of the 10-day ceasefire in Lebanon. The pause in fighting has been welcomed by Lebanese caught in the fighting between Israel and the Iran-backed militia Hezbollah.
Lebanon's leaders are scheduled to meet with Israeli officials this week for a second round of talks. That's according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio. In the meantime, the people who've been displaced inside Lebanon are wondering whether the pause will hold and what comes next. The World's Shirin Jafari starts us off today.
As soon as the ceasefire was announced last week, the road out of Beirut to the south was packed. Cars lined the highway, loaded with families and their belongings. There was joy as some of those who had been displaced headed back to their homes. But for many, returning has been bittersweet. Some saw the destruction left by the Israeli military for the first time. The bridge that connects southern Lebanon to the rest of the country was badly damaged on the day the ceasefire was announced. But that didn't stop people from attempting to cross it. Videos showed families carrying their belongings, climbing over the rubble. Mahmoud Qadboun's neighborhood was destroyed, but he says he's still happy to be back. Our bodies were displaced, he says, but our souls remained here. Is there any place better than home, he asks. Meanwhile, back in the capital, Beirut, the rows of tents that sprung up back in March at the start of the fighting remain in place. Some of those who had taken shelter by the waterfront have lost their homes and have no place to go back to. Rana Salam is an art director and a designer based in Beirut. She's been visiting the families and helping out where she can.
It's a very intense setup of tents, some of them microscopic, that might fit one person when there's probably 4 people inside. A car can become the back of a kitchen.
Salam says some aid groups have come in to help the displaced.
They just are asking for basic stuff. They're not being greedy or anything. They are just asking for basic needs such as hygiene, to keep themselves clean, clothes for children, milk.
Salam says some families have decided to stay in Beirut because they're just not sure if the ceasefire will hold. In the past, ceasefires between Hezbollah and Israel have fallen apart.
They're not feeling secure at all, especially with today you have the drone that's literally, I can feel it in the middle of my living room here. It's not reassuring at all.
These are Israeli drones, she explains. Some have carried out attacks in Beirut. Daniel Zayter has also been visiting the Beirut waterfront on a daily basis. He's a 23-year-old hairdresser.
He every day came from Saida to Beirut on motorcycle to cut hair for free.
This is his friend, Karim Al-Hajj, translating our conversation. He tells me that Zayter knows hardship. He was orphaned as a child, and his adoptive mother died when he was 9. So when the war started and people from the south descended on Beirut, Zayter wanted to help. Al-Hajj says his friend doesn't have financial means, but he can use his skills.
He always feel amazing because he make them smile. The haircut change everything.
Al-Hajj says a haircut may not sound like a big deal when lives are at stake, but by providing this service, his friend gives them a sense of normal life and dignity. Every day, a line forms as he sets up his plastic chairs and arranges his equipment. Children and adults all come and Zayter gets to work. He doesn't ask for money, he says, but some people give him a tip. Al-Hajj says for now, everyone in Beirut seemed to be living in limbo. He was planning to start his own hair salon, but then the war broke out.
I can't open a shop right now and I don't succeed, you know. If I have to pay the bills over there, I have to make a haircut like $20, $25. And not everyone can pay this much for a haircut now.
I asked Rana Salam, the designer, what she thinks about the potential for a next round of talks between Lebanese and Israeli officials scheduled in Washington this week. She says people in Lebanon are tired of war and they just want to live a normal life.
I'm a war child. You grew up on the civil war in Lebanon, and I'm now 60, and I don't know, I don't want to go to my grave, with just a hopeless case.
Lebanese President Joseph Aoun said on Friday that his country will continue to negotiate with Israel. These negotiations are not a weakness. They're not a retreat or a concession, he said in a televised address. Hezbollah is not part of the talks. For The World, I'm Shirin Jafari.
Monumental news today out of Japan, though it was a long time coming. Tokyo rolled back restrictions on the sale of weapons abroad, something it has not done since ratifying its pacifist post-World War II constitution. Yuki Tatsumi is senior director at the Institute for Indo-Pacific Security. She told me Japan's interest in lifting its ban on lethal weapons exports dates back to Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
A lot of countries, including Ukraine, reached out to Japan to see if Japan can provide ammunitions that they might be able to use to up the game in terms of deterrence and so forth. But Japan has not been able to do so because this was pre today's revision.
Interesting. So you see this as a result of countries coming to Japan for help in the wake of Russia invading Ukraine?
European theater, yes, very much so. Japan does have a long-standing, deepening security cooperative relationship with countries like Poland, Switzerland, Norway, all these different countries that are really facing pressure from Russia.
Yeah.
And for the last couple of years, and even more so because current administration in Washington is quite temperamental.
Tell me how the temperamental, as you say, U.S. impacts what Japan might do.
They have traditionally looked at the U.S. as ultimate security guarantor in NATO system. But the rhetoric of this administration tends to be on a harsh side. It can't be interpreted as Washington is walking back from its commitment or role as the anchor of NATO. So that kind of set the motion. Japan also got the demand signal from Southeast Asian countries like Philippines, Vietnam. That actually also feels maritime pressure from PRC.
China.
Yes, China. So Japan has been limited in terms of what it can provide to help their defense capability build up.
Okay, so they're seeing demand both from Europe and from neighbors in Asia, you're saying. This longstanding policy, though, not to export arms, it came in the decades after World War II. I want to go back to the roots of this policy. Was it a direct result of the war and the pacifism that came out of post-war Japan?
Yes, that was a very direct response. We Japanophiles call it one of the major World War II legacies in terms of its institutions and policy guidelines that Japan has had historically. So yes, this is definitely one of them. But it has been revised over time as Japan's circumstances changes.
So is this decision to export weapons a fundamental departure from that post-war past in Japan?
I would argue very strongly against that because it still does need to be considered case by case basis. So this is not a blanket approval as if the floodgates of all these, made in Japan weapon is going to come out of Japan to all over the world. Japan cannot export to the countries that are in the middle of a conflict. Japan cannot export arms to countries that are in, UN Security Council resolution violation and things like that. So this is very much kind of a limited, targeted relaxation of the guideline.
There is a part of Japan's constitution, though, that prohibits the waging of war. Does arming other countries challenge the constitution? It sounds like, based on what you've just said, you would argue no.
I would argue no. For example, just because this is a kind of a wild scenario, but this policy revision will not open door, for example, for somehow Japan can now provide those assistance to Iran, for example, because it's in the middle of a conflict. But it does allow Japan to export their system to the countries like Poland, who's not in a conflict, but is definitely feeling the pressure, or countries like the Philippines, not in armed conflict, but still feeling the pressure from China and wants to build their deterrence capability.
I want to get into some details here. Are there specific weapons that Japan produces that other countries want?
Patriot system is one of the main thing that a lot of NATO countries uses. There's definitely a need for backfill some of those munitions for those countries.
And the Patriot systems are the ground-to-air missile defense systems.
Right.
And Japan produces the munitions for those?
Yes, it does.
So given the prohibition on directly supplying arms to a country at war, could, for example, Japan sell Patriot missiles to Poland, and then Poland could turn around and give or sell them to Ukraine?
Technically, depends on what kind of a transfer agreement that Japanese government negotiates with Poland.
Okay, so as you said, a lot of case by case here. You've mentioned Poland, the Philippines as potential buyers. Are there other big ones?
Japan and Australia signed the joint production of the destroyers that are based off of one of the Japan's destroyers that it currently operates. So first 3 of those frigates are to be produced in Japan and transferred to Australia. And then they're going to gradually transfer all these production technologies, knowledge, facilities, and all that. So something like that was not possible before this guideline, but now it is.
Okay. As we have mentioned, Japan took a very pacifist stance in the decades after World War II. That is, part of its self-image. How's the Japanese public talking about this particular decision?
So this particular decision has been consistently explained by the government that this is a means for Japan to help other countries defend themselves. It does have a support of the public, and it also, now that the Japan's own security environment is getting worse with North Korea, Russia, and China, there is a great desire to make sure that Japan has enough security partnership around the world to safeguard its own defense, and supporting each other in that way is one means to do it. Part of what drove Japan in this direction is because of their security threat that they're feeling from China.
So do you see a kind of an arms race starting in East Asia?
If China continues on this current path, I think countries like Japan and South Korea has no other choice than to further their efforts to defend itself. Nuclear is a completely different game. But in terms of conventional, there will be a desire for those countries, Tokyo, Seoul, and certainly Taipei, to up their game in terms of defending themselves.
Yuki Tatsumi is the senior director at the Institute for Indo-Pacific Security. She spoke with me about Japan's decision to lift its ban on lethal weapons exports.
Coming up, Germany is wrestling with a huge dilemma, really huge. A 26,000-pound humpback whale that's been dubbed Timmy can't get himself out of the Baltic Sea. The prognosis is not good. Marine biologists, millionaires, and followers on the internet all want to help.
We as humans have to acknowledge that our technical and other measures to try to actively free the whale are limited.
But what really is the best way to help? That's later on the show. Stick with us. You're listening to The World.
This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. A new wave of investors is betting on Venezuela. Since U.S. forces deposed President Nicolas Maduro in January, foreign companies have been eyeing opportunities in the energy, finance, and infrastructure sectors, among others. For some of these investors, it's a rare chance to get in early in a country with vast natural resources. But is Venezuela really on the verge of an economic comeback? The World's Tibisa Isaiah has more.
In recent weeks, dozens of investors have been flying into Caracas for a series of closed-door meetings. They are there to check out business opportunities in Venezuela. The group includes corporate executives, finance people, and advisors from across the globe.
We, for this trip, had so much interest that we had to turn it into a conference on the ground. We had 55 participants from all over the world fly in.
Charles Myers runs the firm Signum Global Advisors, and he organized one of these trips. Here is what he told Bloomberg after coming back from Caracas in late March.
Things are moving at light speed for foreign investors. The government is pushing through significant reforms. Most people, including myself, walked away even more optimistic on the future.
Venezuela is changing its laws to open its oil and mining sectors to private investment after decades of state control. At the same time, Washington is allowing some investors to operate despite ongoing sanctions. The two countries have restored diplomatic ties, and direct flights are restarting next week after being suspended for 7 years. All of that is drawing interest, but not from the usual big players, says Elias Ferrer of Orinoco Research.
We have a lot of investors who have an appetite for high risk, and these are mostly coming from Latin America or other emerging markets.
Ferrer runs an advisory firm that helps investors navigate Venezuela. He says many of these early movers are the so-called wildcatters, investors willing to take big risks for potential big returns.
Like Colombians, Brazilians, Turkish investors, the Indians.
The giant U.S. oil companies like ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips are sending in technical teams to take a look. But for now, he says they are mostly in a wait-and-see mode, not ready to commit serious money. Part of the issue is that even as Venezuela is passing new laws, it's not clear how they will actually work.
The government wants to have a lot of control, and things are done very ad hoc. There's no clear rules. Then they're used to corruption, and that's something that's going to be very hard to change.
Another major challenge is the state of Venezuela's economy. It shrunk by 80% over the past decade, and the country is dealing with the highest inflation in the world. Economists say the conditions aren't in place for the kind of investment that is needed.
Venezuela en este momento es un país que está en default, que incumplió el pago de su deuda.
Economist Omar Zambrano says Venezuela defaulted on its debt and it's been cut off from international credit markets. But the International Monetary Fund is now re-engaging with Venezuela for the first time since 2019. And that could eventually unlock financing. Still, that process is just beginning, and some economists say the biggest obstacle is politics. Harvard professor Ricardo Hausmann is a former Venezuelan finance minister. He says the country is not investable without credible institutions and rule of law.
I want to emphasize that democratic rule, constitutional rule, is a prerequisite for economic recovery. It's not something that happens after economic recovery. I have a vested interest because I want to see democracy sooner rather than later, but I don't think that the plan is feasible because you cannot recover without democracy.
It's not clear when Venezuela will hold elections again or what a political transition might look like. Some opposition figures have been released from prison, and leaders like Maria Corina Machado say they are ready to return. Still, for some investors, the political uncertainty is not a deal breaker. Here is Charles Myers again.
Foreign investors don't need to see a transition to democracy. Foreign investors invest in countries around the world, including in the Gulf, where there is not a democracy.
but he says he expects Venezuela will transition to democracy in the next couple of years. The question is whether that optimism will translate into real investment and real change for the Venezuelan people. For The World, I'm Tibisay Sea, Mexico City.
Here's a job opening you won't see posted on LinkedIn. Requirements include bridging earth-shattering disagreements, being calm under pressure, and the ability to schmooze. If you're good at one-liners, that would also help. Yep, the United Nations is looking for a new Secretary General.
Welcome to New York and to the United Nations headquarters. You are going to take over the most impossible job on earth.
That is the first ever UN Secretary General, Trygve Lie, from a UN video, when he was passing the torch to his successor, Dag Hammarskjöld, in 1953.
So far, there are only 4 candidates to be the next Secretary General, far fewer than there were the last time the job came open 10 years ago. Chile's former president, Michelle Bachelet, was the first to be interviewed for the position. That happened today. In a live-streamed session, she faced a wide-ranging Q&A from 193 member nations.
I have the honor to speak on behalf of the 39 members of the Alliance of Small Island States. In this regard, allow me to pose the following questions.
Bachelet is one of 2 women and one of 3 candidates from Latin America. Her grilling will be followed by one for UN nuclear chief Rafael Mariano Grossi of Argentina. Tomorrow, UN trade chief Rebecca Grinspan will be on the hot seat. And finally, Senegal's former president Macky Sall will take center stage in the General Assembly Hall. The Secretary General's job is nothing short of gargantuan. Help maintain world peace and support the poor and vulnerable. The current Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, summed up the qualities needed this way.
Today's complex challenges can only inspire a humble approach. And this requires the Secretary General to maximize the unique convening power of the UN, to redouble efforts for the surge in diplomacy for peace, to foster trust, build confidence, identify areas of convergence, mediate in good faith, and constantly bring people together.
By tradition, the Secretary General rotates by region. Guterres was Portugal's former prime minister, so he checked the box for European representation. He was preceded by former South Korean Foreign Minister Ban Ki-moon, who represented Asia, who followed Ghana's Kofi Annan, who represented Africa. In theory, it is now Latin America's turn.
Antonio Guterres will complete his term as UN Secretary General at the end of this year. Now, I doubt that any of the candidates will ask during their interviews, so let me tell you, starting salary north of $225,000 annually, according to most sources. Reportedly, the benefits are amazing.
You are with The World.
This is The World. I'm Marco Werman. Yesterday, a humpback whale dubbed Timmy began to swim again, and many breathed the sigh of relief. But then he got stuck once again in the shallows off of Germany's Baltic coast. It is a saga that began early last month. The roughly 45-foot, 26,000-pound creature seems to have gotten lost and wound up in the shallow Baltic Sea. Ever since, the travails of Timmy the whale have captured national and international attention. But private efforts to save the whale, including some millionaire money, are raising ethical concerns. Fabian Ritter is a marine biologist and member of MIR, a Berlin-based marine mammal conservation group. As the author of 5 books on whales, he's been closely following Timmy's situation.
The whale has a long history now of being, first of all, entangled in a fishing net. Several weeks ago, it has been freed from that, but some parts of the net are remaining in its mouth. The skin condition has deteriorated significantly. He has a very bad skin all over, and we don't know about internal injuries. There's some scars on its skin indicating a propeller strike, so the general condition is not very good, to say the least.
And what's the likelihood that the whale will not be able to be saved at this point?
Live strandings of whales where the whale is being freed or comes free from its original position and then restrands are a good sign that this individual whale has a very low likelihood to survive. This whale in the Baltic Sea now has restranded itself 5 times, which is quite telling about the general condition and doesn't give much hope on its survival.
How extensive have the rescue efforts been so far to save the whale?
They have been extensive. He came free again, stranded again, came free again, and then went into a shallow bay near the island of Pöhl, where it was stuck now for about 20 days. And then it freed itself after more attempts were made to try to rescue it with large machinery and many people. And only yesterday it came free again, swam around for 2 hours, and then beached itself again. And that's the position where it is now, in very shallow waters, and it's pretty worrisome.
Yeah, some pretty sophisticated methods, including a privately funded effort called Operation Cushion, using inflatable rafts to buoy the whale and help it move away.
Right.
I see a lot of zinc ointment applied to the whale as well. Boats are circling this whale. I was just looking at a video where Timmy is stuck. It seems that those boats are causing the whale, while it is slowly dying, great distress.
That has to be feared. The many activities around the whale with people in the water and jet skis and other boats surrounding it certainly have an impact on the whale. Given its condition, we have to fear that it is stressed. And probably all these efforts are, at this point in time, not helping the whale, almost to the contrary.
Yeah, it's really depressing, to be honest. Official efforts to save the whale have been called off. There are now private efforts underway. I mentioned earlier that some of these efforts have raised ethical questions about attempts to save wildlife like this. What are those questions?
Questions refer to the danger that any more efforts to save it have the potential to distress the whale and even cause injury.
So you're a marine mammal conservationist, Fabian, but you also have been a vocal opponent of trying to rescue Timmy. Why do you take that position?
Because I rely on the experience of whale rescue teams worldwide. I've been in contact with people that have saved whales. And given that they, looking at the images they see, declare that this is a hopeless case. And I've been saying from the very beginning of this stranding several weeks ago that it is legitimate to let this animal die. It's a natural thing that wildlife is dying all over the place. Whale strandings are not a rare thing. The rare thing about this stranding is that the whale actually survived for several weeks. But at some point, I do think that we as humans have to acknowledge that our technical and other measures to try to actively free the whale are limited. And at that point in time, I do recommend that we should take our hands off.
It is reportedly in distress, breathing irregularly, for example, barely moving. Has there been any discussion about euthanizing the whale if it is in clear agony and pain for so long?
Absolutely, but the officials and experts decided very early in the process that euthanization is not an option. Think about a whale that is lying close to a shore, many people watching, cameras on it, the media world is watching. And then you trying to bring this whale to death in potentially several ways, which could include an injection of poisonous substances. You might want to choose a large gun to blow away its skull and its brain. And a third option that has been, although very rarely, been applied is ballistics. And given the situation and the pretty heated discussion in the German public, you wouldn't want to use either of these options, especially because all of them have the potential to increase the pain. Imagine a whale that is not dead after the first shot, after the ballistics have been applied. That would be a disaster for any kind of witness.
So it sounds like the only thing to do is to let the whale die. Will there be any efforts to stop causing the whale so much distress, getting those boats out of the way, and just what is the equivalent of hospice for a whale?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we come to the understanding that this whale is not to be saved. At the moment, it seems like the efforts are going on. There has been a lot of activity around the whale, including the attempt to pursue the original strategy, which includes floating devices and then carrying it, believe it or not, over several hundred kilometers through the Baltic Sea into the North Sea. The ideal would be to transport it to the Atlantic. That was the plan. It didn't work so far. And I think all this procedure will probably do no good on the whale, but really harm it.
Fabian, you mentioned how so many people in Germany have become invested in Timmy the whale and its dilemma. Even Germany's president, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, went to where the whale is stuck to monitor the situation. I mean, humans are inclined to feel sympathy for suffering animals. Why do you think, though, this whale story has captured so much attention?
The crucial point here is its visibility. It's happening before our eyes, on our doorstep. And of course, we are sentient beings, we as humans, and we feel with an individual that is obviously suffering. The whale is a symbol for the salvation of the world or the condition of the ocean in general. So it's a loaded situation in every sense of the word. And people feel very strongly about it. What worries me is the way that discussion goes. It's very heated. Experts have been bashed and even threatened. And that is kind of a mirror of the situation in our polarized society. And it's regrettable that the situation goes out of control in terms of how people deal with each other. I repeat saying that we are almost more talking about each other than with each other. And that makes me really sad.
As an expert, have you faced any kind of aggression through this whole episode?
Oh, yes, I have received a lot of emails and numerous uncountable comments on social media, which were not very friendly, to say the least.
And like, what kind of things are people saying to you?
They really say, you're not an expert, please shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. And those are the more mild things that I'm reading.
Fabian, you alluded to this earlier. If we really wanted to help save whales, what should we be doing in our everyday lives to help that effort?
That's a very good question, because it has to be stressed that we are looking at a much larger problem that is kind of symbolized by this individual whale. This whale is a victim of fisheries, and it's one of several 100,000 whales and dolphins that die each year in fishing gear. And that is really a very, very big problem. And so, of course, we are into it as individuals and as societies. Think about our fish consumption, which is directly related to the way we are fishing, the kind of fishing gear we are using. We know very well that gill nets all over the place have a very high rate of bycatch of whales and dolphins, of seals, and millions of seabirds. At the same time, we know the solutions. We need to regulate fisheries. It is a scandal that gill nets and other destructive fisheries are still allowed within marine protected areas. Believe it or not, that is a normal thing, not only in Germany, but in Europe and worldwide. And if we want to have a look into the future and not only talk about the symptoms, and this whale is a symptom of the problem, but also look at the root causes, then we have to significantly and profoundly change the way we are conducting fisheries.
Fabian Ritter is a marine biologist and a member of MIR, a Berlin-based marine mammal conservation group. A quick note before our next story. The European Union's top court has ruled that Hungary's so-called child protection law goes against the core values of the EU. The 2021 law banned content about gay or transgender people from schools and primetime TV. Judges at the European Court of Justice said the law discriminates against LGBTQ plus people and violates basic principles like human dignity, equality, and freedom of expression.
This ruling is significant. It is the first time the court has found a member state in violation of the EU's foundational values, the principles that all countries in the bloc agree to uphold. The question now is how Hungary's incoming government responds.
It's not clear whether the new Prime Minister, Péter Magyar, will repeal the law. If he doesn't, he risks losing millions of dollars that have been frozen, in part because of the law. One of Magyar's main election promises was to get some $20 billion released by the EU.
You're listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. Coffee is fuel for many of us, gulped while at the computer or on the way to work. But in Sweden, a tradition still stands that sometimes you need to reserve coffee time for the people you care about, and that includes time for yourself. It's known as fika. The World deployed its northernmost reporter, Joshua Coe, to go get caffeinated the Swedish way.
On the outskirts of Gothenburg on Sweden's west coast, I observe Swedes in their natural habitat, a coffee shop. I'm here in search of fika, the Swedish ritual of sitting and having coffee. So far, what's uniquely Swedish are the fluffy cinnamon buns. But to my untrained, un-Swedish eye, nothing else looks all that out of the ordinary. So I break cover and turn to the couple in the corner behind me, Victor Johnson and Ebbe Luvehed.
Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt, but can I ask, is this fika what you're doing right now?
Yes, I would say it's a fika. Don't you agree?
I would say that fika takes place more in the afternoon.
Do a fika anytime, I would say. But maybe, this menu here, it's a breakfast package, right?
Yes, so it's not a fika.
No, it's maybe a little bit too much, actually, to be a pure fika.
So just don't cross the line into making it a meal.
To settle this low-stakes argument, Victor says we should ask a professional. He turns to the coffee counter behind us.
Would you say that we've crossed the line here for a regular fika?
Yeah, but I would say, you are doing the fika, and you are doing a breakfast.
Yes.
Else Henriksdotter is the owner of Bara Café, the coffee shop where I've been conducting this research. With her years of experience as both a Swedish barista and investigative journalist, she knows the difference between fika and, just staying caffeinated. On charming white-blue porcelain plates, Henriksdotter lays out the essential elements of fika.
And there you sit. Cinnamon bun, something sweet, and a coffee.
No, sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of this coffee myself. It looks amazing.
Yeah, I'm just going to chew through the cinnamon bun.
Another essential of fika is a person to catch up with.
And this is me generalizing over Sweden, but we're not that kind of social people, meeting up just randomly or saying hi to everyone that we see on the street. But we are very caring about the connections that we do have in our lives. So having a fika with someone is also taking the time to meet your grandmother or having the time to meet your best friend. It could just be a half an hour sitting down, catching up.
And I heard this is also just catching up with yourself.
Exactly. It's also to talk to yourself. You sit down, you have a cinnamon bun, and you're just this is so good. This is so nice. And how is my life going? What am I thinking about to do? Everything. You just have time for yourself.
Opening up this coffee shop last year was Henriksdotter's way of taking time for herself and her young family. Before reinventing as a coffee shop owner, her career as a journalist was taking a toll. She was a longtime crime reporter for Sweden's national public radio.
4 pistoler och 500 gram amfetamin i beslag, samt 4 personer häktade.
That's Henriksdotter reporting on the local gang war in 2020. 4 pistols and 500 grams of amphetamine were seized and 4 people were arrested, she says. Henriksdotter covered it all: shootings, domestic violence, and murders. And that included a dismemberment and a beheading.
And it was, for me, a lot, because you never see that types of crimes otherwise. And it made me a bit, I wouldn't say out of space, but it was hard to focus, and you think about that all the time. So I figured it was nice to just have a peace of mind from that. Not forever, but right now.
As much for her as for many in Sweden, coffee became something of an escape, a chance to find her focus and her footing. A reset, a life fika, if you will.
Fika itself is to kind of take a step back from things, and like you were saying too with your child and your family, take a step back and sort of focus on things that you care about.
Exactly. And I think also if there was something else I was going to do except being a journalist, this was it. I really love working with people, meeting new people, and drinking coffee. So where else would be the perfect match than in a coffee shop?
But sitting down for fika on a Saturday is not all that easy for a coffee shop owner. A line accumulates at the counter. It's the beginning of the afternoon rush and what many consider official fika time. So Henriksdotter gets back to making other people's coffee dates complete with hot beverages and those sweet, delicious cinnamon buns. And as for me, I get back to recording all the coffee-making sounds.
At least you see how important fika is in Sweden when you see the line outside the cafe.
For The World, I'm Joshua Coe, Gothenburg, Sweden.
The World is produced by GBH and PRX, broadcasting weekdays from the Nan and Bill Harris studio in Boston and from the Department of Communication at UC San Diego. Find us online anytime at theworld.org. I'm Marco Werman.
And I'm Carolyn Beeler. Join us back here again tomorrow.
The World is supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. By the Lumina Foundation, committed to a fair, universal system for learning beyond high school that offers every American the chance for a better life. LuminaFoundation.org. By the PRX Ambassador Council, whose members include Renee Vacchio-Albi, Roman Mars, the Kelson Foundation, and the Ken and Lucy Lehman family. The World's theme music is composed by Ned Porter. The World is a co-production of GBH Boston and PRX.